Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly exciting day and afternoon. This is the launch of the toolkit for achieving equal pay in the workplace. So if you think, whoa, what is that? Then you're in the wrong place. You've joined the wrong Zoom. So we're very excited about the launch of this toolkit. It's an incredible collaboration between trade unions, academics, HR professionals and employees. And last but not least, it's facilitated by our very own Sophie Berridge, who was our Senior Campaigns Officer at the Equality Trust. You'll hear a lot more about the Equal Pay Toolkit in this seminar, but I just want to say that at the Equality Trust, we're interested in equal pay and fair pay. And the reason that we thought of this toolkit and brought together many different organizations is because we think that pay discrimination isn't just about individuals, isn't just something that affects individuals and their life outcomes. It's also something that affects the whole of society in terms of structural inequalities. And that's why we're here today. Now, as I've said, this is a fantastic collaboration. We'll tell you a lot more about that. But first of all, I am delighted. I'm absolutely delighted to have 4 fantastic speakers with us today. We've got Francesca Lawson, who is the co-creator of the Gender Pay Gap Bot Twitter campaign, which I'm sure many of you will remember from International Women's Day, and Francesca will tell us a lot more about that. We've got Joanne Galazka, who is the Women's and Equality Officer from Unite, who will be talking about a bit more about the toolkit and her experiences. We've got Manborde, who is the Equality and Diversity Officer from Equity. And last but not least, we've got Shona Thomson, who is from GMB, the convener and winner of the prestigious Eleanor Marks Award and home care worker in Glasgow. And Shona will be talking a little bit more about her own experience of addressing equal pay or unequal pay in the workplace. And I have to say one more thing, which is I am absolutely over the moon. I am delighted to have a fantastic and an amazing diversity of people in the audience today. So thank you so much for joining us. But just to say, we have an incredible range of people in the audience. We have people from bus drivers, care workers, nurses, gardeners, teachers, business managers, bankers, journalists, union reps, academics, and I know I've missed so many more. But it's fantastic to have you with us today. We hope that you get a lot from this webinar. And just before we start, a quick couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, I want to just say that we have our chat function. Please say hello. I can see that you're already doing that, which is great. Say hello to each other and please pose any comments there. But if you have any questions and answers, please could you keep it specific to the Q&A tab on Zoom and pose your questions there, making clear who you're directing it to. I also want to encourage you to use social media and use the hashtags Equal Pay Toolkit and Equal Pay 50. And I'm just going to also mention that in the middle of this webinar, after our speakers have spoken, and I know they will be comprehensive and concise, just so that we can allow a much bigger audience discussion. In the middle of this webinar, we're going to pose 3 very quick questions for you, survey questions, which we would really love if you could answer. They'll be very quick. Will take you less than 30 seconds, I'm sure, because you're such a smart audience. And that will be great. Now, as I've said, I hope you enjoy this webinar. I'm pretty sure you will. I hope you'll get lots out of it. And without any further ado, I want to introduce our first fabulous speaker, Francesca Lawson, the co-creator of the Gender Pay Gap app. Francesca, please.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Zubaida. Yes, as you mentioned, it was myself and my partner, Ali Thomson, who created the Gender Pay Gap Bot. That's the automated Twitter account, which responded to employers' International Women's Day posts with cold, hard data. And today I'm here to tell you a little bit more about why we made it and what the difference is between equal pay and the gender pay gap, but then how they're related as well. So I'll just start off with a little bit of background information about the bot for anyone who's missed it or anyone who's not on Twitter. Whenever a company listed on the government's gender pay gap service, so that covers UK companies with more than 250 employees, we would respond with their gender pay gap data as a quote tweet, so it's positioned above what they've originally posted. Now this data is all publicly available, but from the people that we spoke to, so friends, family, colleagues, awareness was pretty low. So we thought it's an ideal opportunity to bring more attention to this data and sort of really help people see through these messages of celebration that employers communicate on International Women's Day. It came from this frustration of seeing our social media feeds all full of lovely messages of empowerment and celebration, while not enough progress is being made. These statements rarely reflect the reality we live in. 71% of women have experienced sexual harassment in public. 8 in 10 women say they don't get listened to by health professionals. And 77% of employers pay women less than men in the latest gender pay gap figures. And by putting it back in the spotlight, we've wanted to help the public understand what's really going on behind the all-women photo shoots and the inspirational quotes. We wanted to show that despite these supportive gestures, we're still a long way off reaching gender parity at home, at work, and in wider society. And discount codes on pink socks and telling us how strong we are is not making a difference. Of course, we can't expect employers to fix every single condition which creates inequality in our society. But then what they pay their employees is something that's within their control. And that's something that I think needs to be highlighted a lot better. And one of the things that's kept coming up in the response that we've had to the bot is the difference between equal pay and the gender pay gap. And now I'm hoping that we're all pretty aware of the difference between those things, because we're here to support the launch of the Equal Pay Toolkit and learn about how to better challenge pay inequality. So I won't go into too much detail on that, but I think the important distinction for me is that the gender pay gap figure is useful for understanding where inequality may exist, but it doesn't tell us why it exists or what's causing the inequality. Lots of employers will try and put that down to a representation issue. They'll say things like, you know, we don't have enough women in leadership roles, or they work in a typically male-dominated sector. But that's never really the full picture. And a really interesting example comes from the education sector, because teaching is a female-dominated profession. But what we've seen in this year's data is that schools and academy trusts are among the employers with the largest gender pay gaps. In many instances, women are actually represented quite well, even at the higher levels, but the organisation still has a significant pay gap. And just an example to kind of look up from that, one that I remember the bot highlighted and then subsequently got blocked, was from Transform Trust. So yeah, you can find their data on the government's gender pay gap service. And that's just a really interesting example of how representation isn't always the right answer. Because an employer can still have a gender pay gap if they've achieved equal pay, but conversely, where there's an equal pay problem, there's likely to be a gender pay gap too. And looking at pay inequality should be one of the easier ways that employers can improve their gender pay gap. They don't need to wait for more women to get trained up the leadership ranks or for the workplace culture to become more inclusive. So if employers are serious about closing their gender pay gap, I'd suggest they first look at equal pay. And if they've not achieved equal pay, they've got no hope whatsoever of closing their gender pay gap. And that's why I'm really excited to see the launch of the Equal Pay Toolkit, because once we've equipped employees with this knowledge, it'll help them identify and challenge pay inequality and keep the pressure on employers to pay workers fairly. I just want to wrap up by saying thank you all for listening today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the speakers. If you're interested in seeing more from the Gender Pay Gap bot, search Twitter for @PayGapApp, and then I'll also pop my own personal Twitter and LinkedIn in case you want to contact me afterwards or ask me any questions. And for anyone whose employer got called out by the Gender Pay Gap bot that's with us today, please pass on my apologies to your social media teams. The pay gap is not their fault, but no doubt they would have had a pretty stressful day dealing with the response. But I hope the message that we've sent out is that to say something worth saying on any social awareness issue, you've got to be doing something worth doing. So yeah, that's all from me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesca. That was great. How incredibly inspirational. And hopefully you all saw the impact that Francesca and her team had on that day. It needed to be done, and they were the brain behind the campaign. And hopefully it is the start of a big journey. Now, as we are short on time, thank you so much, Francesca. We're going to move on to Jo Galazka, who is the Women's and Equality Officer from Unite. Jo, let me hand over to you.
Thank you. And being asked to not go on is quite hard for a trade unionist, so bear with me. I'm really delighted to have been asked to speak at this launch of this fantastic toolkit. I'm speaking on behalf of Unite and my sister colleague, Siobhan and Dean, who's our National Women's Officer. I know she played a fantastic role in contributing towards this toolkit. I think one of the things that makes this toolkit so outstanding is that it was jointly produced by unions, academics, HR specialists and lawyers, those who fight for equal pay and win for women workers every day. I think this toolkit will prove to be an essential item for all unions in their fight for equal pay. And that's across all of our workplaces and all of our sectors. I think this toolkit offers a starting point for our reps and officers to start those crucial conversations about pay in the workplace and build a campaign and negotiate improvements. This toolkit is evidence-based, giving it real credibility. One of the things to note is it'll be available in print version, which I'm really excited because I've got a copy here, but it's also going to be available online, and you can go through the steps, step by step, to suit your workplace. So 50 years on from the Equal Pay Act, and we're still faced with women being paid less than men for doing equal work. And the gender pay gap is still not closing fast enough. In too many workplaces, men continue to be paid more than women. The consistent undervaluing of roles predominantly done by women continues to feature daily in working life. We need to start talking about our pay and asking the right questions if we're ever to address equal pay and change the reality of working life for women. The reality of pay can no longer be a topic that is treated as simply a private matter and something not spoken about openly. We also know that the economic environment at present is only adding to the challenges of equal pay. There's increasing issues around occupational segregation, performance-related pay, and workers being forced into accepting jobs at any cost just to survive. Women workers, we know, are most adversely impacted. We have to increase pay and not accept pay cuts. The cost of living crisis and lack of access to childcare is only adding to the problem. Affordability should never ever be an excuse to pay women less. I've been asked to focus my contribution in section 2 of this toolkit. Section 2 provides guidance on how you go about addressing pay inequality. The section talks about talking about pay, which is something we spoke about already, the importance of collective bargaining, which we all know as trade unionists, the questions you should be asking your employer, why you should ask your employer those questions. And I think one of the brilliant things is it's got some sample surveys which you can adapt to your workplace situation. I think the section on talking about pay, I think the whole concept of equal pay could be new to some people. So there's some really, really important things that I think we should consider before we even start the process of looking at equal pay. Reflect on your workplace. Where is it that men and women tend to work? And I think then the secrecy around pay has just compounded this problem. We've seen that most recently with the Glasgow City Council example, the hard-won dispute, which is ongoing. I don't need to tell you about the importance of collective bargaining, but consider, does your workplace have it? Because that's the starting point. We know where there's collective bargaining, that the gap between men and women's pay is less. It's important to know your agreements, who's in scope, who is the pay source, look at contracts. Consider in the private sector, you may have global frameworks and policies around pay, which may come into play here, but we need to be making the demand about equal pay at the right levels, and it should be part of our pay discussions every time without fail. Again, it goes into what questions you should ask, but I think the starting point for any rep who's using this toolkit is to understand whether there is an issue in your workplace in the first place. Our work is being treated unequally, and then it's about how you demonstrate that that's happening. And to demonstrate that, you need to ask the right questions. And I'll cut my contribution now by saying this guide is fantastic. And again, it goes on. There's an example in there about one of our own members, Lucy from RBS. It was when she started asking the questions that she discovered she was being paid £31,000 less. And it was at that point she also discovered she wasn't being paid the right holiday entitlement. She won that campaign because of the support of Unite. She didn't give up. And that just demonstrates that our members sometimes assume they are being paid correctly. It's not until we start talking about it that they discover that they aren't. And just to wrap up my contribution, I think this is important. Equal pay is important to us all. It's a priority, and this brilliant toolkit gives us as negotiators the tools to take positive action in our workplaces and beyond. As a union, we'll continue fighting for solutions such as collective sectoral bargaining, pay transparency, and for women, which is the most important thing here, to be at the bargaining table and pushing for that change. Because without women being part of the decisions that it impacts on them, we're not going to make the positive change. So please check out the toolkit, please use it, because equal pay is bread and butter of what we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Jo. That was incredibly inspirational, wasn't it? Like, I mean, really. And that's what we need. We need the inspiration, we need the resources, we need the transparency, we need the collective bargaining. It's all there in the toolkit, and we will be finding out more. Now, without any further ado, I am conscious of time. We're going to move on to Ian Manborde, who is the Equality and Diversity Officer at Equity. Ian.
Thank you very much,
Hello.
Zubaida. And thanks, Jo, as well. 5 minutes goes very quickly, doesn't it? So I'll be very brief. Zubaida, do jump in when I've got 1 minute left. So Ian Manborde, I'm the Equality and Diversity at Equity. You will know many of our members. You will see them on film and TV, and when you go to the theatre. We've also got an equally large proportion of members who are singers, dancers, drummers.
Ian, I'm going to just stop you for a second.
Yeah.
If you could just bring your microphone a bit closer, because we're hearing a lot of rustling, perhaps it might help.
Right, okay, is that better, Zubaida? I've got it held right there.
Yes, I think, I'm sorry, yes.
No, it's all right. So a diverse body of members, and the issue of equal pay for us is profoundly important, primarily because we are in one of those sectors, a bit like the media, a bit like fashion, where our members are routinely asked to work for nothing. And so where our members are in work and where there are anomalies around pay, particularly inequalities in pay between men and women, we take that as a very, very serious issue. We will pursue every single case. Jo, as you said, as seriously as anything else in terms of the trade union agenda. I want to say a sincere thanks to Sophie Berridge and the Equality Trust for asking Equity to contribute to the toolkit. And one of the things I just wanted to talk a little bit about was a section on equal pay audits. It's a section that I wrote. And in essence, we know that in terms of trade union work, we're making the argument either there's an anomaly in the workplace around a breach of policy or a potential breach of law. We need the evidence to prove that that's the case. And that in effect is what an equal pay audit does. And I just want to read you this very simple introduction to the section on the equal pay audit. In essence, the audit is trying to determine whether women or people with other protected characteristics are engaged in activity in a workplace that can be deemed as equal work when compared with the work of other groups who are paid more. This includes situations where, although men and women in the workplace are broadly segregated for example, men are in a warehouse and driving, women are in catering and cleaning, who are engaged in like work, and their jobs and skills are the same or similar. The audit can also determine whether their work is of equal value, in that, for example, the level of training required or responsibility is similar. The role of the audit is to take that set of questions around comparabilities in the work that's being done and to identify where anomalies in pay exist. When you look at the toolkit, and particularly the process of doing an audit, you'll identify there are 5 key steps. If we can just briefly touch upon those. They rest, first of all, in determining the scope of the audit. Who are you going to look at and why? And I think one of the things that's really important to underline there, something that Joe referred to before, is how you get the buy-in of trade union members, how you get people confident enough to want to talk about their pay. Because one of the great ironies of the issues around equal pay is no matter that they very much relate to poorly paid working class women, the stigma of poor pay often means, ironically, that people aren't prepared to talk about it. It's a tragedy, really, isn't it? So there's a really important role here for trade union reps to have early discussions with members about why this work is important and why their consent to disclosure of information about their pay is essential to unearthing inequalities in pay. You also need to then move on. The second stage is identifying, well, what kind of anomalies are there? So, for example, one of the key terms that we talk about when we're trying to identify problems with pay is where there is work of equal value. And that's a very typical problem in trade union work. There is job segregation, men largely doing one kind of work and women doing another. One of the things that we need to identify is, even though there might be some differences in that pay, there is fundamentally work of equal value taking place. Work where there are similar skills levels, where there's similar levels of responsibility. When you've identified, for example, that there is elements of work of equal value, what you then move on, the third stage is identifying why there are differences in pay. One of the challenges of an equal pay audit is having employer buy-in from the outset. And that is challenging, but there's a good section of the toolkit that deals with that. You need employer buy-in because one of the things you're perhaps going to need to look at is the disclosure of pay earnings and pay data over a significant period of time, just so that you can tease out for how long those anomalies have existed.
1 minute, Ian.
Right, just moving on, the fourth stage is to establish why those pay differentials exist. Employers can try and say that there are genuine material factors for this. Usually that's a smokescreen. And then very lastly, you need to plan to overcome any anomalies in pay. And one of the things that the toolkit talks about is establishing equal pay policy. Lastly, as Joe has done, I just want to underline how significant, how important, but also how well crafted the toolkit is. Get hold of it, use it, and start to apply it so that we can overcome the problem of inequalities in pay. Thanks, Zubaida.
Thank you so much. Ian has really raised quite a lot of questions for us about just how complex the area is. And that, by the way, is exactly why we all came together to produce this toolkit, because we realize that the sheer onus of responsibility on the individual, on the woman to find out whether there's an unequal pay issue in her workplace was enormous. You know, where do you start? Which takes me beautifully onto Shona. And Shona, as she was a home care worker in Glasgow, and can hopefully talk to us a little bit about her experiences, but also about the toolkit and really highlight just how complex and overwhelming this area is. Shona, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for having me here today for the launch of this Equal Trust Equal Pay Toolkit. I myself have been a union member and activist for over 20 years in Glasgow. And, you know, as Joe said earlier, it's hard to believe that we're more than 50 years since the first law was passed on equal pay. But believe it or not, our story, got highlighted, started for us, our members, 2005, our council paid us a lump sum of money. I think it was sort of hush money, and thought that as low paid workers wouldn't question that. They've got a misconception of low paid workers being ignorant and things like that. But these things raised red flags to us, and memberships themselves started to question as to why this was. So our actual fight for equal pay started in 2007. That's how it's obviously became the Glasgow Equal Pay Women's Historic fight. Now, last week, our union members, we were days away again from a second equal pay strike in Glasgow. Again, we lost confidence in our employers to make meaningful progress in our claims and in the job evaluation process. I'm going to come back to that. But as I said, as someone who's worked in care for over 20 years, I know how valuable the work that women do, whether you be a carer, a cleaner, a caterer, school crossing patrollers, it's all the low paid graded jobs that women do in society, and especially in the people of Glasgow. Now, for years, we were pushed aside by the council and discriminated against. Again, I will reiterate that. I will say that the misconception of thinking that these workers in these low grades were, I can't say educated enough, it was to say that, as I said, ignorant in the fact of legal going-ons and what the rightful pay should have been, you know, but we did eventually discover it was job for job like. That's a simple way of describing it to the worker. Job for job like, if you're doing a similar job, you're entitled to that similar rate of money. The men in Glasgow City Council, they were in better pay because they had access to bonuses and additional payment schemes that the women didn't have access to, and in fact were barred from. So therefore we had to fight, and we had to be listened to, and we had to arm ourselves with the knowledge on equal pay so as we could talk to people about a campaign and be paid fairly. And it is a long process. It's not, it's not an easy fix. It is a long journey to get that equal pay process in. Now, we didn't have many resources when it first started, so it is great to be here talking about a toolkit for women to use in the fight for equal pay. We want everyone to be able to stand up and challenge pay discrimination in the workplace, because we know the work that women do is valuable and it must be rewarded properly and paid fairly. The toolkit also talks about pay transparency, and this is so important. To this day, so many employers, they keep their pay and other terms and conditions secret to the worker to make it harder for us to challenge them. In many places, managers even tell workers that they are not allowed to talk about pay. This is wrong. In fact, I mean, that is the point for trade union activists to start the conversations with members about the pay inequalities in the workplace, and to build the campaigns and to start negotiating the process. Now, in every workplace, GMB is fighting for pay transparency so everyone can get a fair deal at work. Now, many times that is easier said than done, but with more tools like this equal pay toolkit and more conversations about equal pay like this one, we are making a difference. And again, it is important to recognise that equal pay is a journey. Another misconception that the single status in Scotland, that fixed all equal pay problems, and it is a thing of the past. But that is not true. As we have clearly seen in Glasgow, as union members and activists are always looking to end discrimination and ensure it doesn't creep back in, we upskill our members on things like job evaluation. We're giving them tools to be able to recognise if inequalities sneak back into our job evaluation or pay and grading system. So when you stand up for equality, as we are doing in Glasgow, you're standing up for all your fellow union members and workers, women and men. And a really simple overarching point for me in achieving equal pay in the workplace, as we've demonstrated in Glasgow, one of the best tools for achieving equal pay is through organised and campaigning workers, confronting pay discrimination together and under the banner of trade unions. That will properly resource and support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona. Thank you so much. And we thought that was really important to hear from someone who's been on that journey, which is an extremely difficult journey. Now, before we go on to questions, and I've got lots of questions for my panelists, before we go on to questions, I was wondering, Cerise and Sophie, if we could share our survey. Now, participants, please bear with us. We've got a really quick survey for you to do. Hopefully it will be straightforward. You just simply use your tools to click. It would really help us, I think, in terms of feedback for this equal pay. So we'll give you half a minute, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, just to quickly fill this in. If you could just do that now, please, it'd be really great. Please remember that there's 3 questions, so do remember to scroll down. Just want to check with Cerise, is there any reason why somebody can't see it? We just had someone saying that they can't see it. Should it?
It could be the device that you're using, but we've had 23 people so far
Okay,
fill it out, so it may be.
I will give another 20 seconds. Right. Okay. Are we okay, Cerise, to move on?
Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. That's really, really helpful. We wanted to just give you feedback while you were still with us. Now, we've got quite a few questions, so just bear with me while I just catch up with some of them. Right, I'm going to start with I'm going to start with one to Shona first, as you were our last speaker. Shona, very quickly, if you were able, do you think if you were able to use the toolkit a couple of years ago, several years ago, did you think your fight would have been any different? How would it have helped?
Yes, it would have definitely been different. It would have shortened the journey for a start, because I mean, that's us just going into phase 2. As I mentioned there, we were actually, today was the second day of a 4-day strike. We've got another 2 days in April, but we have agreed to postpone jointly the trade unions till we further negotiations. No, this toolkit is absolutely, I just think it's amazing, right? And I think this would have just so helped you back. It would have given the membership, but it would have given the activists more insight as well. As I said earlier, is employees, managers, it's bad enough trying to do terms and conditions at work and pay and grading systems without actually getting into a discriminatory job for job, for equal pay, saying that you should be paid more, without having actually all the knowledge and the research that has been done so great on this toolkit. To me, that would have probably halved our battle if we'd had all these resources at our fingertips years ago.
Thank you so much. Well, hopefully this toolkit will change the journey for many women out there. Ian, a question for you, a bit of a tricky one here. I don't know if this is the case or not, but one of our members of the audience has asked about freelance members, which perhaps is pertinent to equity. I'm not sure whether it is or not, but I think it's a very good question, and it's a question asked by several members of our audience, which is, what about freelance workers in this situation? How can freelance workers go about finding out if there's an unequal pay issue for them?
Sure, no, it's a very good question, Zubaida. And so we are a union of self-employed workers. There are some of our members who are employees, conventional employees, but the vast majority of our members are self-employed workers. So they may be contracted collectively under an equity agreement, but many of them are contracted voiceover work, for example, audio books, that kind of thing. I think the starting point really, it goes back to something I said earlier on. Our members know how abusive the cultures are within the entertainment industry. It's an aggressively commercial sector that will seek to exploit you without doubt. Our members are conscious of that, but it's important for the trade union to then say any inequality, even if you're not experiencing it, will harm you in some way. It will drive down your wages. We all know the reason why, for example, we tackle disability inequality is because that lays the benchmark for uniform inequality also. So we address everything equally. So the starting point is to talk about what inequalities of any kind do to drive down standards of decent work in the industry. We then talk about the rights that all workers have. But it's important that we talk about the actual examples that exist of inequalities in pay. One of the things that's been published, I think it was yesterday, was a blog that I wrote alongside another blog that Duncan Woodhead and the FDA had written about how inequalities appear in the different sectors that the FDA represents and equity represents as well. And I've given some examples in there for some quite high profile productions like The Crown, that's produced by Netflix. I've picked that one out just to illustrate that this isn't a kind of backstreet kind of small theatre issue. It sits in the very heart of the industry. And we kind of flag up where we find these anomalies in pay to get members to think, could that be happening to me? Is it likely it's happening to me? You bet your life it's happening to you, because that's the nature of this industry. It will seek to attack your pay and conditions. That's why you need to belong to a trade union. So it's making workers conscious of the inequalities that they're probably aware of anyway. It's the job of the union to pinpoint them and to make members want to challenge them through their trade union. It's not an easy task getting workers to talk openly and confidently about their pay. As we were saying before, Zubaida, but it's the job of the union to make all members alert to their role in working with the trade union in identifying how they can work with us in solidarity with other members to identify where anomalies may exist.
So can I ask a controversial question to Joe, which is that if you're not a member of a trade union, will this toolkit still be able to help people navigate? I mean, Ian has made reference to it, but will it help individuals to help navigate the equal pay toolkit in the workplace?
Absolutely, and I think we've got to recognise that collective bargaining in the UK doesn't reach everyone, and we know low-paid women are in, well, the sectors that are low-paid is where our women are concentrated. So we absolutely, this toolkit will help, and those who are members of a union, whether they're in a workplace that's got collective bargaining coverage or not, will be supported by the union if we identify there's an equal pay claim, and whether that's through a legal, assisting with a legal assistance with that, or helping them put in a grievance, that individual representation will be there. And we're never going to address it if we just concentrate this toolkit on workplaces where we've got good coverage. So we've got to do our bit, haven't we, to make sure that all women in our unions, across our movement, are aware of this toolkit, and it's our reps who go in to do those individual representations. They're the ones that are going to share this, and as I've said, it'll be part of our reps training, it'll be part of everything we do as a union. It's too important not to do it, and those women that aren't yet in the union, it's our job to encourage them to join, and we do that by collectively organising them and organising those women, like I say, not yet protected by collective bargaining. So it does matter. And it's not controversial because we all start somewhere, don't we? So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, thank you. I've got lots more questions to come back to, so please please stay with us for a bit longer. I want to go to Francesca with a particular question, if that's all right, Francesca, since you're still with us, which I'm delighted, which is around your tactic on International Women's Day was incredibly illuminating in terms of just showing the disparity between policy and practice, or rhetoric in this case, rhetoric and practice, which given over 50 years after the equal pay gap was, I think, in itself quite a national scandal. But can I ask you, did any of those organizations where you highlighted the pay disparity, did they get in touch with you out of sheer curiosity to say, what more can we do? What next?
We've actually not had anyone contact us individually to kind of start the ball rolling on any actions that they can take. We have had a couple of companies that have published statements of varying degrees of quality. A lot of them do just churn out the same old excuses that I kind of mentioned earlier about representation, without sort of much commitment to do anything about it. You know, they'll say, this is why we think we have a gap, without putting kind of the weight behind, you know, fixing it. There was one interesting response that I saw is Capita, financial services company. They published, I think it was like their HR director or someone within their people team published an article on LinkedIn, kind of acknowledging that, you know, they are glad that we highlighted this data because it's something that, you know, they are trying to work on, and unfortunately it's not moving as fast as they'd wanted to. And to an extent, I think probably the pandemic has not helped matters on that front. Yeah, I think that we've had a couple of companies have brought up furlough as a reason for like their gender pay gaps being so shocking, but of course that's only applicable for sort of the last 2 years. It doesn't explain why the gap was created in the first place. Yes. So yeah, I think that I'm really pleased that, you know, some companies have become sufficiently aware that they've wanted to sort of communicate more about it. You know, it enables members of the public to continue holding them accountable. And then next year, when we've got another year's worth of data, we can then see, oh, well, you said last year that you were going to commit to diverse interview shortlists, but you still, you know, not even budged at all on your gender pay gap. So it'll be really interesting to see what's going to happen next.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much there, isn't there, to think about. Now, I just want to return. I'm sorry, I was looking through the questions and there are so many, so I'm just going to pluck some out, and I'm going to pose this to all of you because I think it is a fundamental one, which is, you know, what are the things that you can do with resistant employers? And of course, that's part of the package, you know, and we hear quite a lot that there's different ways of being resistant, isn't there? You know, we've just heard from Francesca about some of the explanations that are given about why companies can't show their gender pay gap or address it. And we've even heard the pandemic being used as an excuse, which is an interesting one, because even if you say that it's because women were more likely to be on furlough, that in itself is a question. Why were women more likely to be put on furlough? So what do you do with resistant employers? I will give you all 1 minute each to please come back. And this time we'll start from Jo. Jo, what are the things that you can do? What are the tactics that you can use with resistant employers to address issues around unequal pay issues and collective bargaining?
I think, yeah, we've got to look at, like I've said, what's in scope. Have we got collective bargaining that can be used? If so, again, getting the buy-in of the members, but ultimately it's the conversation that it's in their interest to do this. Again, we don't want to use the nuclear option of shaming people on social media, and we don't want to go down the legal route, which we will do if we have to, because there is law protecting equal pay. And if it's proven that that's the case, we'll absolutely back our members 100%. But ultimately, like we've got in Wales, where there's social partnership and there's the Fair Work agenda, we want to work with employers to get this right. That's what it's all about. And as trade unionists, you know, equal pay didn't just appear overnight. It was because it was fought for. And we've got to make sure that we continue to do that. You know, we know that if women are valued for the work that they do, we're going to be a better society for it, and we're going to be more productive, and more women are going to go into those sectors where we need them to be going into. And as a woman, as a female trade unionist, equal pay, I can't believe we're still having the same arguments about it. It's in everybody's interest. It's not bringing, you know, equality for one doesn't mean less equality for another person. So we've got to keep doing it. So we'll press the nuclear option where we need to. However, it's about getting around the table and convincing them. And once you can demonstrate that with the survey, which you've got in this toolkit, it's a no-brainer, because the legal, I think it was Sophie was saying, as soon as you say an equal pay claim and the laws behind it, that scares people off addressing it. But yeah, we'll continue to work with people and employees to get it right. But the unions are key. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. What about you, Shona? What are your feelings on this?
Yeah, again, from an activist point of view, it's all about collective bargaining. And I believe when you feel you have an issue, this, or you think you're looking towards the equal pay thing, it's important to whatever workplace you are or employer you are targeting for that. Well, sorry, the word's not targeting, I suppose, but whoever you're looking at to get this addressed with, it's important to get what other trade unions are all involved in these workplaces and within this employer, and do it all collectively, and get your you have to do you have to get your legal you have to get a legal team on board there as well. But it's all about just getting organising the workforce and recognising you know, you have to have your aim and have your goal at the end of it, and then just set up that structure, but use it strength as in, you know, uniting together in that workplace from all different unions and angles. As I say, I'm speaking from an activist point of view here, and that's the best way, you know.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I think especially given your experience, your lived experience of having to deal with an employer yourself, I think that's very helpful to hear. Francesca, what are your views on this, about how do you deal with resistant employers?
I think, well, for me, it's about persistence. You know, don't let them think that, you know, you've forgotten about it. It's like following up on sort of any meetings and emails that you and communications that you're having, and just sort of always keeping the conversation about you know, pay parity on the table. Don't let it sort of like slip down the priority list, as, you know, all too often these things do. And just to echo kind of what Jo mentioned about kind of union membership is valuable for individuals as well as sort of as a collective. You know, you're so much stronger if you've got someone on your side, you know, whether that's a whole network of kind of an organized workforce, or whether that's literally just sort of someone that you can communicate with and sort of get advice from, who's got your best interests at heart, rather than necessarily the needs of your employers. Because of course, as I'm sure we all know, it's any opportunity to save money will be exploited, and you know, when that comes down to people's wages, that's not acceptable.
Thank you very much. Yes, and it's and I think that's the most important thing, hopefully, that we're getting from this conference, from this webinar, which is you are not in it alone. Ian, would you like to just come in here?
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks. I think one of the interesting things about working in the entertainment industry is that employers are very much interested in their reputation. So, Joe, as you were saying, you want to be on the right side of history here, don't you? That's the best place to be. So, you know, we want to use that positive, constructive argument. But before we go to the nuclear option, which we will do, we have to, don't we, as a trade union, we have to show our members how seriously we take this particular issue. I think the other thing to remember is, and it's kind of something that Shona alluded to, all work relies on goodwill, doesn't it? All work relies on unpaid goodwill. Slowly withdraw that. And we know how difficult that can be. And I think what I mean by that is, let's go back to something I said earlier on, is ensuring that members are confident in understanding why this issue is so important to them, and letting members consciously make the decisions about withdrawing any free time that they're given, any kind of goodwill that they're giving as well. But I stay Zubaida with the argument that even the government now are saying that anomalies in pay need to be addressed.
Absolutely.
That's got to encourage employers to want to do the right thing.
Now, I'm sorry, Ian, I'm interrupting, but it's because I've very tricky, got less than 4 minutes. I need to wrap up, but it's so difficult because I've got this one question. So I'm wondering if we could answer it in 20 seconds or less, which is, what about pay band scales when they are in the process of being pulled together? Is that somewhere? Should we be preemptively asking to be involved in when pay band scales are being put together? Yes or no? And you could say a little bit more, but very, very quickly, because we've got less than 3 minutes. Joe.
Absolutely, and that's part of what we do as unions, to make sure that do not become an issue. We want to be proactive, not reactive, in making sure we address equal pay, and that's one of the biggest ways we do it.
Wonderful, thank you, great answer. Shona.
Yeah, totally agree as well. It's got to be addressed, because every equal pay claim, if it's a successful win, will and should eventually lead up to a whole job evaluation, a whole total pay and grading system within that workplace.
Thank you. Ian, pay and grading system.
Yep, absolutely. Where we've got the rights to collectively bargain, we should be involved in any pay and reward system as well. And Zubaida, trade unions are forever, every single day, helping employers out of a hole. So my view would be, listen to us, because we can avoid you getting into a serious problem.
Yes, we're all in this together. Francesca, very quickly, last line.
Yes, because we need greater transparency. You know, we need someone sticking up for kind of what's right for the worker at all times.
Wonderful. Gosh, what a great panel. Comprehensive and yet concise. Now, thank you so much to everybody, including the fabulous audience. The chat has been going. I've barely been able to keep up. I can see the fantastic enthusiasm for this toolkit. The link to this toolkit will hopefully be shared right now on our chat. Here it is. Please click on it. Please look it up. Please follow it up. Please share it. We are hoping that this toolkit will be the beginning of a journey to help individuals to address equal pay issues. We are really conscious that it's not the whole answer. There are intersectional issues out there. There are issues in relation to trans rights. There are issues in relation to being, you know, non-binary, and that some people don't identify with either gender. We are aware of all of that. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of that journey. It's a toolkit that's going to be worked on even more. We're going to try and make it interactive, digitally interactive, but we'd be really keen to hear your thoughts. So please share it, use it, And hopefully this is the beginning. This is the beginning of us all holding employers to account. So thank you to all my fantastic speakers. Thank you to Reese from the Equality Trust for helping us out. And most of all, thank you to Sophie Berridge from the Equality Trust for pulling this all together. Thank you, everybody. Take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.